Hello and welcome. Are you ready to consume? My name is Dylan, aka Queen. Across all socials, I am KWEEN, KANEKWEEN, two E's for Twitch and YouTube, three E's for Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, founder of Entermentaltainment and passionate consumer of entertainment media. Consume Culture is a podcast about shifting the way we consume entertainment media for the better. It's not cancel culture, it's consume culture. Today we have a returning guest for our part 2 episode of The Last of Us Part 2, Matthew Ramsden.
Thank you. Ready to get sad? Yeah, thank you for having me. Happy to be back.
Of course. Today we are consuming The Last of Us Part 2 again because last time we just couldn't get enough of that scene. And
we got maybe 10% of the game.
Yeah, through my list of talking points got about 15%. But today we are ready to consume and hopefully get through as much as we can. But it's just so juicy.
There's a lot to it. It's thick with like 5 C's.
It's 18 C's.
So
but first we're going to talk about what we have been consuming as of late. Matthew, what have you been consuming?
Yeah, so kind of as of this recording, I have not watched this movie yet. However, I have read the book and I'm very excited to watch this movie. It's now on Netflix. It's called I'm Thinking of Ending Things. This is kind of a horror thriller story about this couple going to meet the boyfriend's parents for the first time.
Oh.
And it is, like I said, I've read the book. I have not seen the movie yet, but the book is one of the most mind-bendy, I don't need sleep, I need answers books I've read in a long time.
Oh my gosh.
Like, tore through it.
I totally miss that feeling of like, I can't flip the pages faster.
Yes, and it is a short read. It is like 200 pages, but like, you just go. It grabs you by the collars and it's like, let's do this, and like buckles you in your seatbelt, and it's Dodge Camaro, or yeah, it's a car, and just goes.
I love that so much. So my what I've been consuming recently was at the time we release this recording, it'll probably be a little bit ways away, but not to say I haven't watched it over and over and over again. I actually just watched it earlier today at the beginning of the day because I needed a little pick-me-up. And so the first thing I did was I got up out of bed, went to my couch, and pressed play on Lady Gaga's VMAs 2020 medley performance.
Yes.
Just, oh my God. It like, first of all, she was really brilliant in putting a quote-unquote live audience track behind it instead of it just being silent. And I think what I felt anyway, I think her intention with this performance was like, hey y'all, this is what the Chromatical Ball would have been like.
More, yeah. I mean,
but this is the closest I can get to get to right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I have to commend her for performing like she did and giving it, like always, just 100%, and putting on a damn clinic with a mask on, with a really cool mask on,
with what looked like a very heavy mask on, dancing down, singing her heart out. I mean, this is
theater.
If you didn't walk away from this performance thinking Lady Gaga is the greatest performer of our generation, I got nothing for you. Then
What
to
else
walk
does this
over,
woman need to do?
then to walk over in her 65-inch heels up steps to a piano that looked like a brain and play the piano like she has been playing for the last 85 years, even though she's only like 30. Like, it just blows my mind. And not only the talent, but also if Gaga can wear what looked like a steel mask on her face and sing the way she did and played piano and danced the way she did, quote unquote, live, you can wear a mask. And
I
that,
was
that
having this I was having this conversation with someone. One of my friends, Mike, is a property manager, and he also does like some contracting stuff for his properties that he has. And he was saying, "Oh yeah, I was like on a scaffolding for 5-6 hours in like 90-degree weather with a mask on, and
oh,
I was fine." And I'm like, "Yeah, you know what? When I go for runs and I'm running 6-7 miles, I have a mask on." So you could wear it to Trader Joe's,
right.
Bethany.
Right. And then, in typical Gaga fashion, she has to take it a step forward, in her own House of Gaga brilliance, and show up with like 6 different outfits, all designed around the mask that she's wearing.
Oh, we love
Just
a health and safety queen.
we she said pandemic, but make it fashion.
Pandemic whomst.
But
But
so
yeah.
anyways, let's get into
Well,
let's get into the meat of this before we run out of time again. The Last of Us Part 2. Last time we left off talking about, also, before I go any further, if you don't want to hear spoilers about this game, please stop listening because the rest of this is going to be us literally going, to the end of the game. So it's going to be all spoilers all the time. Uh, Not all the time, not the rest of this podcast, but just for now, if you don't want to hear anything else about The Last of Us Part 2, now is your warning. So now, since you have been warned, we can get into it. The last time we left off, we talked about Joel's death scene. And I think, us talking off the podcast, we were like, it's an episode that warrants an hour and a half podcast.
yes.
Did we mean to do that? No, we
No.
really did not. But there's just so much to it, and it's the most controversial, I would say, of the scenes in this game, and the most important. And I'm glad that we did.
I think there were a couple moments in this game that, I mean, we could go on forever about. I think we could do a whole episode about the turn, the Act 1 to Act 2 turn.
Oh my God, yes.
Like we could do that
Absolutely.
for hours. We could do hours about the fight on the beach,
Totally.
at the end of Santa Barbara. But there's just so much here. We have to get into it.
Totally. So one thing that I would like to talk about today and make sure that we don't miss, because kind of my original thought was to go through chronologically, and we kind of will do that a little bit, but kind of going off the cuff of that is, I want to talk about the representation in The Last of Us Part 2, specifically the LGBT plus representation. And part of the reason I want to talk about this is because, similar to Joel's death scene, it was a hot topic and it was a convoluted, controversial topic. And So one of the characters we're going to talk about is named Lev. Um, Lev, you come to find out, is is a trans man, um, and who was casted out from the Seraphites, which is the group that him and his sister Yara belong to, um, for shaving his head because he had longer hair before, um, and in the Seraphite society, typically the men would shave their heads and would keep their hair short. And so as soon as he buzzed his hair, he was casted out uh, for looking like a boy. And the controversy around this character and his story comes with dead naming. And if you don't know what dead naming is, it's basically when someone calls attention or says, frankly, says uh, the name given to a trans person, not the name that they chose. Um, and in the game, there's a scene where Abby and Lev are escaping from the Seraphites, and in the midst of the action, the Seraphites dead name Lev. Um, and moments later, after kind of the action dies down, um, Abby is like, hold on, were they referring to you? And Lev, is like, yes. And Abby is like, does that bother you? Like, do you not want to be called that? I'm paraphrasing here, but this is pretty much how the conversation went. And Lev was like, basically like, yes, like it does bother me. And the controversy around the scene was the fact that they even said the name out loud. And I also want to preference kind of my take on it with, I'm not trans. I am gender fluid, which is not the same thing at all. But it's just to say I'm within the community, and I do my best to do my research on it and also listen to queer voices and trans voices. So I can't speak for the community, and what I saw, and anyone can feel free to correct me, but from what I saw is it's the fact that they said the name itself that offended some people. And in my opinion, when the name was said and in the context of the name being of Lev being dead named, the subtext of it was, these people are evil. Like, the Seraphites were evil and did some horrible, 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 despicable actions outside of dead naming. And I think in a way it's like, if you don't want them to dead name, then you also don't want them to rip people's intestines from the bottom of their stomach. Both of those actions are evil in different ways. um and so when I played it, and I hope when other people play it, they take away from it that that is not okay. In my opinion, it would be different if they dead named Lev and then Abby also called Lev by his dead name or was okay with it. But Abby herself was not okay with it immediately. I mean, right off the bat, she knew that it wasn't okay. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's rather remarkable that they have this character in there, and they do handle it with a level of nuance as much as they can. Kind of going off what Dylan was saying, that I am not a trans person. I do identify as gay, but I am cisgendered in that way, so I cannot speak to the trans experience. I I try to listen to trans voices in these situations and in these circumstances. Um, that being said, I think it's a really complicated scene and sequence and kind of aspect of this character. I do know the actor who played Lev is trans, and kind of not, I don't want to say approved, but brought some authenticity to the performance and brought some authenticity to the character.
And also for context, I didn't know this when playing the game, but I found out after. The reason why they had a trans character in the game in the first place is because one of Neil Druckmann's family members is trans, and he wanted to do them justice by having them represented in the game.
I actually didn't know that. Wow. But and to your point about the context of it's not just, he isn't just dead named and that's it, and that's a recurring thing in the game. It happens that once and it's shot down. It's like, no, this is not okay. We don't do this. And it's similar to when I forget his name. The guy in the beginning of the game calls Ellie a slur, a homophobic slur.
Oh, Seth.
Yes, he calls her a slur, and it is in that context. It is like, no, we don't do that. That is wrong.
And then she refuses to eat his bigot sandwiches.
Right. And it's like, kind of Ellie, being punk rock as she is, goes like, no, I don't want your charity, your weird homophobic charity, because you know Maria made you feel bad, or Maria told you to.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So I think the representation of Lev. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think the representation of Lev is so vital in that queer storyline, because I think Lev represents a storyline that doesn't get a lot of attention, which is a queer person of faith.
Yes.
Which I think is so interesting.
God. Oh, yes.
Because I mean, what's so fascinating to me is that Lev, who has been cast out, who's been abused, and you know all of this stuff by the Seraphites, he still believes and he still follows that doctrine.
Yes, and he still calls the infected demons because he believes that they're demons, and he
Right.
grew up with the idea that they're demons, and he still believes in kind of this all-powerful female figure being kind of their leader. And also going back to what I was saying earlier, saying that the Seraphites, were evil and were doing evil things. I also want to make sure that I say that Yara and Lev were, and in a sense are, still Seraphites. So it's not to say that the Seraphites are inherently evil.
No.
I think they do absolutely deplorable, evil, despicable things. But that's one of the things that the game does well, is there's always three sides to every story.
Yes.
And there's the story that you experience, there's the story that they experience, and then there's the story that actually happens.
Yes, I think it's so important, especially in these contexts of organizations.
Right, because it's like you have the kind of war, quote unquote war, between
WLF and
Maria's settlement and the WLF, and then you have it between the WLF and the Seraphites, and then you have it between all three of them. And all three of them get muddled together and cross paths. And but what the game does is it says there is no bad guy.
Yes.
Everyone's the bad guy. And when I said last episode that not one person in this game is redeemable in a sense, I mean, even Lev, like, and this is another really uncomfy, controversial discussion, but when Lev goes back to confront his mother, you find him cowering in the corner in the fetal position with blood all over his face because in self-defense he killed his mom, who was, you know, a bigot who would not accept Lev being trans, and frankly probably would have killed Lev. I think the context of that scene was like, not context, like subtext of that scene was like Lev's mother was basically going to kill Lev,
Right.
for coming back and having the audacity to come back with a shaved head, and being and in self-defense he kills her. And whether that's justifiable or not, I'm not saying either way. Whether it is or whether it isn't, the act of murder is bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't care who I piss off on this podcast. I think murder is bad.
Well, it's like, I know
Yeah,
it's
no.
simple to say it in that way, but I'm saying it in that way because the point that I'm trying to make is that even the best people make bad decisions, and also even the best people do awful things, even if it's for the right reasons.
Yes. I think that's so important to talk about in just the idea that these characters are doing what they need to do to survive, and I think in that context, morality becomes a lot funkier, and you have to kind of find out where your morals are.
And jumping off of that point, we have Ellie going through and finding herself morally, and then you have that the first WLF kill that she actually gets to do herself without being on the trails of Tommy, with Nora, and that that completely red dripped basement hallway scene where Nora has nowhere to go, and you yourself, the player, has to press the button to do this.
And so I think what's really interesting about that scene is up until then, it was kind of a rah-rah, like let's go get him, in a way.
Yeah.
Like you were kind of ready to go. At least I was, to my experience. I was like, all right,
totally,
these guys need to die. And in that scene, I don't know what I was so uncomfortable by having to do the action and having to hear it. And that was one of the moments where, like, this isn't fun anymore.
Well, also, Nora says, why should I tell you where Abby is? You're going to kill me anyway. And Ellie says, because I can make it quick, or I can make it like, she says something to the effect of like, because I can make it quick, or because I can draw it out.
Something to that effect.
Which is like, you are really seeing Ellie take a turn for the worse, because that's like a Joel line.
That's a Joel line. That's a Tommy line.
Yeah.
And we kind of see her understand that side of her in an earlier scene where she sees kind of the leftovers, I'll say, of Tommy interrogating these WLF soldiers.
And then you can see that she is picking up on the tactic of both people have to match where they point on a map,
right?
And kill you. But what she doesn't know is that he doesn't actually fulfill that promise. He knows that he's going to kill both people anyway.
Yeah.
But she doesn't know that. She thinks that's his tactic.
Right.
And so it's like going back to the idea of imitating Joel in a way that she thinks is justifiable when actually, if you really look at it, Joel was doing some pretty shady stuff.
Yeah, I think she acknowledges it when they're in the library. I think it's a throwaway line, unfortunately, but I think it's she looks at Dean and goes, "Yeah, Tommy and Joel needed to do really some a lot of dark stuff to make it through those
Yes,
years."
yes,
It's something like that, but
yeah.
it's just kind of like
It's not even
dropped there,
scene. It's like they're walking through, and she just says it.
right? And you're like, wait, go back. What did we do?
Mm.
What is that? So I mean, and we know. I mean, if you played The Last of Us Part One, we know that Joel has a dark side, especially if you go after the people he cares about. Um,
Then you have toward the end of Act One, you have Ellie and the confrontation between her and Mel and Owen in the aquarium. Um, and that's for me when you see Ellie truly at least understand how twisted things have gotten, because you have that moment of she kills Owen and then she kills Mel, and then Owen tries to tell Ellie that she's pregnant but like kind of gargles it because he's dying, and then Ellie goes over and unbuttons her sweater and to reveal that she's pregnant, and you the character already knew that because they talked about it throughout the first act, but
yeah,
her realizing
it's
that, and then I didn't realize this until my second playthrough, but you know that she's off her rocker because at the very last shot of that scene is like a pan down of the blood like floating through the water from Owen. But what I didn't realize was also in that shot is the map that she's been carrying. So she was so off her rocker and off her game that she left the one thing that allows Abby to eventually find her in the aquarium. And that's the whole reason why Abby is able to find her later, because she leaves her map, because she's so
right.
shook by everything happening.
I think she realizes how I think she realizes how far she's gone in that way. I think she realizes just what bridge she's crossed.
Totally. And I wish like this is one thing they do really well with the flashbacks is like you see Ellie realize all of this and then you get to do the flashbacks, and in a poetic sort of storytelling way it's like you as the player is like, oh, I wish Ellie would have realized, the thing we just went through at this point of her life, like in this
Yeah,
flashback, like that final conversation between Ellie and Joel when she's like, my life would have mattered, but you took that away from me. And he's like, you have to understand that if I were to do this all over again, I absolutely would. And she says, I don't think I can ever forgive you for that, but I'd like to try.
oh,
And you can see it in Joel's face that he just wants to hug her so bad and like thank her for finally giving him that grace, but he doesn't because he knows Ellie and he knows that, there's that awkwardness and space between them. And
right. And it's reading the room and knowing like this may not be what she actually wants. And out of an argument and out of an action that came out of making a choice for her. Yeah, yeah,
and like I was saying before, it's like I wish Ellie could have that moment again with Joel, having been through what she's been through, because then I think by the end of the game, if say she was somehow able to talk to Joel again, she would absolutely 100,000% forgive him.
yeah.
I don't know if you feel that way, but I feel that
I
because so much of what she goes through mirrors kind of the way Joel would handle things, and at the end she realizes that this cycle of violence is getting her absolutely nowhere, and that's why she lets Abby go at the beach because yes, and this is another controversial thing that people have differing opinions over of like yes, she's killed probably hundreds of people to get up to that point and felt nothing.
mm,
But then people are like, oh, well, why would she let Abby go if she can kill all these other people and be fine with it and have no problem with murder? But, when she confronts Abby, it's like hard for her. Same with like killing Mel. It's like, she's probably killed plenty of pregnant women up to that point. Um, but it's the like I said in the last episode, it's the through line, it's the thread of Joel being in her psyche and popping up at moments where it matters the most.
and I think to that point, it's how she's remembering Joel as well. It's what parts of him
Yes.
that she is bringing because and whenever she's seen him in her kind of inner psyche, it's been that image of his face bloodied from the golf club, and
Totally.
that's kind of like relit the fire, that anger in her, and kind of like no, keep going and keeps going, keeps killing.
Mhm.
When she is holding Abby under the water and she can feel her go or start to go.
Mhm.
The thing she sees is Joel sitting on the porch with a guitar. It is Joel actually at peace.
Yes, and
That
yes,
realized, yes,
and that was the moment for me where I was like, she would have forgiven him. Like you're getting the context of that scene, that of her contemplating whether or not she would, because I think in that moment, you know, at the end of the game, she would, because she finally understands like you did what you did to save me because I was the last thing that you had to hold on to. And even in Joel's death, Joel is the last thing that Ellie had to hold on to, even though it was also what was driving her crazy.
yes. And I think by acknowledging Joel in that place, in that state of peace, in that I would have, I know she knows she can't tell him this, but that she forgives him, I think is the thing that kind of puts her over the edge and into forgiveness. It lets them go and decides to kind of end the cycle.
Exactly. And I think that had she realized that earlier, she wouldn't have left behind Dina and JJ.
Mm,
And for those who need context, JJ is um, technically Dina and Jesse's baby, although Jesse ended up dying at the hands of Abby. Um, but at the end, we have this whole farmhouse scene where I would like to point out uh, while you're going through Seattle and that like open world section earlier in the beginning of the game, in passing, this isn't even a cut scene. Oh my god, I screamed when I played through the second time. In passing, they're like when you're riding on the horse and you're just like not really doing anything, just going through.
mm,
Dina, um, Dina's like, one day I'm paraphrasing, but she's like, one day I would love to live just like by myself in, some farm with like animals to take care of and totally away from the city. And Ellie's like, I would like that too. And Dina's like, really? I would never think you would be okay with that. And she's like, no, totally. Cut to the farmhouse at the end of the game. And oh, it's so nice to like have that come full
Two
circle and
two women, a baby,
yeah,
farmhouse,
a baby,
rustic AF.
animals, just this perfect life, and that's what it was. It was a perfect life, and I don't think Ellie would have walked away from that
Mm,
if she was ready to forgive Joel.
absolutely. And I think what's really interesting about that is that um, Dina gets a letter from Jesse's family, basically saying, "We don't blame you for what happened. We have no animosity. You are family. Like, we care about you. Whatever you need help wise, we are here. We forgive. We, forgive what happened to Jesse, even though it was not your fault. Do not blame yourself. We're good. With you."
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's through that Dina kind of finds a semblance of peace.
Yeah.
So she doesn't have to go through the cycles and the anger that Ellie went through with Joel. It's because she was offered grace right there.
And right before Ellie leaves, kind of in the middle of the night, um, she's like, "What am I supposed to do? Like, wait for you to get back and just think that you're dead the whole time? Like, if you're just gonna leave us behind?" And Ellie says, "I didn't plan on dying." And Dina says, "Yeah, well, neither did Jesse or Joel."
Yeah, it's so good.
It,
It's just so good.
Dina gets it. Dina gets it so much earlier than Ellie, and it's really unfortunate because low
He
key,
leaves.
Dina was right.
No, Dina, and it's hard. I
It's
think
so
it's one of the reasons why I like Dina so much is because I understand how difficult it is to be in her position. And I think that it almost comes with her Jewishness, because she does kind of reference the fact that she is Jewish,
yeah,
and that her sister is practicing.
yes,
Um, and so when Ellie is in mourning and is in actual, in the process of trying to, mourn Joel, basically what Dina is doing is she's sitting Shiva, which, for people who don't know what sitting Shiva is, for the party that is mourning, everyone who is around that person does whatever they want. If the person wants to sit in silence for 5 hours, we are sitting in silence for 5 hours. If the person wants to tell jokes, we are telling jokes. If the person wants to cry, we are crying. Whatever the grieving party needs to do to mourn. And basically that's what Dina is doing, is when Ellie says, "I need to avenge," she's like, "Okay, where you go, I go." I think is what she actually says. And it gets to a point where she kind of needs to break, and it's like, "No, like, I can't let you destroy yourself like this. This is beyond mourning. This is beyond this." At
well,
some point.
you think of the "you go, I go" as like, if you're gonna go, I'm gonna come with you. But it can also be, if you go, I'm gone.
Ooh,
Like, you go, then I go.
yeah,
That doesn't mean with you.
yeah. Oh God.
So then we have Santa Barbara, which at this point in the game, you kind of think up until Ellie leaves that the farmhouse is like the end of the game. I totally thought the farmhouse was the end of
Yes.
the game. I thought sitting on the tractor with JJ and getting that moment to like chill and look out across the horizon and accept this perfect new life that we have, I was like, oh, this is so beautiful. This is such a full circle moment. I'm so happy for Ellie. I'm so happy for Dina. All of this crap has gone down and they get to live this beautiful white picket fence life.
And
But that
then
wouldn't be The Last of Us.
no, we need to go a little bit darker into hell,
So then,
California.
basically what happens is Tommy shows up one day and with information on where Abby is. Um, because, in the theater scene, right before Jesse dies, Tommy basically says to Ellie that, you know, Abby let you go. Abby is out there somewhere, but that doesn't mean we have to like hunt her down. And also, we don't even have a lead on her, so like it's kind of a dull point. It's like you just gotta let it go. And Ellie is like she gets to live. Like after all of this, she gets to live, and I don't get to have my revenge, but she does. And Tommy says, "Well, is that okay?" And Ellie says, "It has to be because I mean, to her, it's not okay, but they don't have any other way." But then, uh, Abby shows up, kills Jesse on the fly, shoots Tommy in the eye, and she says, "You killed my friends. Like we give you a chance to escape, and you wasted it. Like you could have stopped this," which is rich coming from Abby, because
She,
she's the one that set this whole thing in motion. Um, but also you can take it farther back and say, uh, Marlene set this in motion by telling Joel that they were gonna kill Ellie by getting the virus from her. You know what I mean?
right, and we can kind of
We can go down the whole line,
right.
but uh, but then a year later, Tommy kind of changes his tone and shows up at Ellie's house and says like, "We have a lead on Abby. We're ready. Like we can do this." Um, and he, I'm paraphrasing, but he says something to the effect of like, "No, Ellie, you were the one that said that we have to finish this. You were the one that's so gung ho about getting your revenge because she got to have her revenge. You didn't get to have your revenge." Um, and obviously Dina goes off because Dina wants to keep this life, which is totally justifiable. But then obviously Ellie goes off, leaves Dina behind, and goes to Santa Barbara. Um, so we're in Santa Barbara, and you play as Abby and Lev for like a hot minute. Abby finds basically Abby is following Owen's tracks because Owen claimed that there were fireflies in Santa Barbara, and so she had been saying the whole game that like, if anything had happened to Owen, she was going to do it herself. So Abby finds this radio and gets through to what she thinks is fireflies, which we'll talk about. It could or could not be still at the end of the game. But she gets captured on her way out of the house from a new gang called the Rattlers. And the reason I bring this up specifically is because another thing I noticed on my second playthrough was, if you remember the scene where Abby and Lev are sabotaged by the Rattlers when they're walking out of the house after talking to the fireflies over the radio.
Mm.
That scene directly mirrors the scene between the Joel's death scene. Like,
Oh, it does. Oh my God, it does.
like Abby being tied down, helpless, Lev being like punched in the face and then gets to the ground, and Abby is screaming, "Don't you effing hurt him! Like,
Yeah.
touch him!" Just like Ellie did with Joel. And it's the parallel of like, Abby now has someone who she cares about deeply, that she will do anything to protect. And then you get to see Abby reach the point of like, even if she doesn't say it, the subtext is like, she understands now. She wouldn't exact her revenge on Ellie, even though the last time we saw her, she almost killed Dina, and she almost killed Ellie, but Lev convinced her otherwise. And she said, "Never let me see you again." In subtext, "I will kill you if you see me, if you like come to me again." which I think after after going to Santa Barbara with Lev, I don't think she believes that anymore. And we know that she doesn't believe that anymore because when Ellie finds Abby at the pillars,
I will tell you, oh my God,
that
I
scene, that was, I think Joel's death scene and that scene for me were two of the scenes in the game that felt like I am watching something like gaming history. Like walking into the pillars and looking and oh, this is so brilliant from like even just the gameplay perspective. And again, another thing that you can't experience unless you're playing a game and not watching a movie. The emotion of like going through and trying to find Abby, but not just that you can't, but the reason you can't is because Abby doesn't look like Abby.
oh my, and I mean, when you do find her, I think it's when she makes a sound. She says help.
Yeah.
And you turn and you see her, and you're just. So we mentioned last time that Abby had been training and had a very, very strong build. I was a very, very strong person. Um, Cut to her in the pillars. She has lost all
Every
of her muscle,
everything.
all of her just horribly underweight, gaunt. Her head is shaved.
I mean, to go from it was really smart of them, you know, in the character design to give Abby that kind of iconic braid and then take it away at the end.
Absolutely. And it just goes to show that like nothing is out of place here. Nothing is just thrown in. And then we get to see Lev too, and Lev is again like just worse for wear. His hair's grown out a little bit longer. They're dirty, they're cut, they're just so abused. And then we get to kind of see another kind of mirroring scene where Abby carries Lev to the boat, similar to how Joel carried Ellie to the hospital.
Or how Joel carried Sarah in Last of Us 1.
It's these cycles, they just keep coming around and around and around, and it just, ah. And then, so as Ellie, you rescue them and walk them to the boats, and thus begins the most uncomfortable boss fight I've ever had in my entire life.
Ever. I didn't want to do a second of it.
No,
I was like, there were points where I like literally stopped playing and I was like, what would happen if I just stopped? And if you
and it keeps
stop,
going.
it keeps going.
And one of the criticisms I had, or I've heard, I should say, on retrospect, I don't agree with this criticism, which was the developers don't give you a choice. Like, you don't want to, and they should give you the choice to fight Abby on the beach. And when I first finished, yeah, I agree with that because I don't want to fight Abby. But then when I thought about it more and more and more, I realized no, because I'm not Ellie.
Yes.
Like this character, the
Right.
character wants this, and I am just the voyeur having to press the button. And it
Right.
just so happens that I have to press the button,
And
and that is by design.
and also it's not, you know, just like, you know, you're saying I'm not Ellie. It's not your story. This isn't a Black Mirror interactive story. Like it's the story that they want to tell. And the story that they want to tell is uncomfortable. It makes you think about it does make you think about what you would do in that sort of situation, but like you're saying, you're not Ellie. And I think it's one of the most powerful scenes that I've come across in gaming, to have that whole scene where they are just ripping into each other. And then Ellie gets a flashback of Joel's like sunken in face, beaten in face. And in that moment, she realizes this is just going to keep going because I just threatened Lev. And that's why Abby went after me. Because Abby told me, I'm not going to fight you. Like in the water on the beach, she says, I'm not going to fight you. I'm not doing this. Because, like I said before, I think Abby realizes, like, I don't blame Ellie for what she did because, I had my revenge. Ellie has hers. I don't blame her. And so I'm not going to bat an eye at it anymore. But then she's confronted with it. And Ellie threatens to kill Lev. And that's why Abby agrees to fight Ellie. And so I think in a roundabout way, Ellie realizes, well, if I kill Abby and Lev escapes, Lev is going to grow up to hate me. And then Lev is going to continue that cycle of violence and go after me.
I think that's kind of it. It's just as they realize they need to stop this. And I also want to point out that while Abby got her revenge, it didn't stop anything.
Oh, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah. So one of the kind of recurring themes in Abby's half of the game is that she still can't sleep and that she still sees her father suffering. For background, in The Last of Us Part 1, when you go to rescue Ellie, you shoot a doctor and don't really think about it. Basically, Part 2 is Abby's father was the doctor you shot, and that now she wants revenge for the murder of her father.
I mean, and that also not even just shot, like you as the player playing The Last of Us Part 1 are taking the controller and physically moving it toward the doctor to stick a knife in his neck.
Yeah.
Like, it's intimate and it sets off the second game.
But the whole thing is that even though she has her revenge, she still sees her father dead. She still can't sleep at night. She's still seeing these visions in her dreams. But it's only through kind of redeeming her enemy, or what she perceives as her enemy, with Lev and Yara, that she finds peace.
Yeah, totally.
And to echo that with Ellie, it's only when she forgives and realizes that this isn't going to really do anything, that she kind of finds acceptance and moves on to the kind of the final stage of grieving. And unfortunately, it is after she has lost two of her fingers and Dina and JJ.
Everything. I mean, she lost everything.
And I think the irony of it is when this is the final scene of the game, when you go back to the farmhouse and Dina and JJ are gone, and Dina has taken all of Ellie's stuff and put it into a room, including Joel's guitar that he gave to Ellie, and now she can no longer play it.
Yes. Oh my God. I literally had that written down as a note to say, because that to me, I mean, not just to me, but it was heartbreaking. What a cool and physical way to show that she's truly lost the ability to have the life that she had.
And to kind of circle back with the points you're talking about with gameplay, and do that kind of a really, really cool gameplay mechanic with one of the joysticks having to go into a circle and pick the chords to play, and you can strum on the touchpad on the PS4 controller.
Yeah.
And that's been kind of a really cool thing. Has one of my favorite little human scenes in the game, which is when Ellie sings "Take on Me" to Dina, And
And
such
that
a really
and the fact that that's an optional scene.
yes, you don't have to do that, but I don't know why.
Well, it makes it so much more special when you
It
do
does.
find it.
It does. Um, and kind of this recurring theme of Ellie and Joel kind of playing this song, Future Days by Pearl Jam, back and forth to each other. This is the if I should ever lose you, I would surely lose myself.
Yeah.
And when she tries to play it, she can't. And it's that same mechanic that you've been playing with the entire game. And it just, yeah, it is heavy and it does not feel nice.
And then she takes the guitar and sets it against the windowsill with the curtain blowing, which is a total callback to the first game's title screen. And then the ending shot is of the neck of the guitar and the moth, which was also the very first shot
The
of the
opening,
entire game, bringing it full circle. And Joel, like the very first shot is Joel cleaning the guitar but rubbing the moth. And then the last scene is the neck of the guitar with Ellie leaving in the background. So it's showing like in the beginning, Joel was trying to make everything right. But in the end, Joel is gone and Ellie is left to do whatever she wants to do. And, you know, it's that Fight Club quote of it's only after we've lost everything that we're free to do anything.
Mm.
And that's Ellie's truth. And where she goes, we don't know. I've heard some people speculate she goes back to Dina, but I don't think so. I think, like I said before, if you go, I go. I think Dina is done with that life and that situation. And I also think Ellie kind of is too. I think her leaving the guitar in the room and not taking the guitar is to say that was one chapter of my life, and I have accepted that I have to let it go.
Mm. Absolutely. And I think one of the really, really challenging parts of this ending is I think I was watching a video of someone kind of analyzing this and kind of saying their opinion, which was the first game ended hopefully, but with like a tinge of menace to it, with Joel lying to Ellie. This game ends on the surface real depressing, but with an undercurrent of hope of Ellie kind of being free.
Totally.
So it's kind of a reverse, and these games have such complicated endings that do not let you feel one way or the other.
Well, even after the quote unquote ending of the game, credits roll, and then you go back to the menu screen and it says you've unlocked New Game Plus, which is basically you can play the game over again with all of the weapons unlocked that you found in your first run through. And then you exit out of that little screen to a new title screen. So up until then, the title screen was always the boat floating in the river.
It's very dark, very foggy.
Very foggy, very dark, very ominous, representing the scene where you find Abby at the very end, in the same waters that they both fight in. And then the new title screen that you don't unlock until you finish the game is of a boat washed up ashore, and in the background you can see the building that they described in Santa Barbara being the Fireflies base, basically.
Yeah.
And Neil Druckmann won't say himself, Naughty Dog won't say themselves what it is, but I think we can all agree that Abby and Lev made it to Santa Barbara. And what that means, I don't know. Is Abby and are Abby and Lev trying to
bring the Fireflies back?
Start their own life together? Are they trying to get the Fireflies back together? They've totally cast themselves out of the WLF. And so what does that mean for their future? Are they trying to become Fireflies? Are they trying to continue to find the cure? are, it can mean so many different things, but I think this game does such a beautiful job at so many different things. And one of those things is the full circle and the parallels
Mm,
from the beginning of the game.
absolutely.
Beautiful. And it's just like, I wholeheartedly believe that this game is a masterpiece. I think it's a with the turn of having to play as what you believe is the antagonist in the first half, playing just as equal amount of time playing Abby as you do play Ellie is the most original, thrilling, uncomfortable, uh, poignant, intimate, awful things that I have seen in my days of game in my 27 years of gaming. Like,
Yeah, and
I've never been forced to be the bad guy, and then not only on top of that, but realize that there isn't a bad guy.
in such a beautiful, profound way.
Yeah,
Um, and I mean, what's interesting is that other people have talked about this game too, about the what I kind of called the turn,
the turn.
as it were, of kind of when you see when Abby says, we let you go and you wasted it, and it cuts to black. It says Seattle Day One. You're like, wait, what? And
Oh,
then you do it again as
oh,
Abby. Um,
what a
what
moment.
it's such a like it is such a moment. But what I think was interesting is that everyone kind of like, yeah, the first like day, I just kind of like half-assed it because I didn't know how long this was going,
Yeah.
and we're like, I did not collect all the coins. I didn't, explore everything. So, all right, let's just I don't want to do this. I want to go back to Ellie. And I was like, no, 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 no. You're in this, bud. You're gonna stick in it.
You're in this
And
for the long haul.
right. And I'm gonna argue that Abby has some of the best parts of this game,
Oh my God,
her
yeah.
section.
I mean, oh, one of my favorite sequences in the whole entire game is um, the one continuous shot in the forest when Abby is taken by the Seraphites and is hung, and then that's when we're
Yes.
introduced to Yara and Lev. That sequence is so brilliant in so many different ways, and like, I heard someone say like, well, it doesn't land because you know that Abby's going to survive, and it's like, I disagree with that. I think
Yeah.
it's an introduction to Yara and Lev, first of all, which is what an introduction.
Oh,
And
arrow
second
out of the
of all,
darkness.
if you see someone hanging, whether you know they're going to survive or not, it's like, how the hell are they getting out of this?
Yes.
And I think that was the point of that whole scene.
I I think my favorite section part of this game, or not of this part of the game, the Abby half, has to be the hospital. Just because
Uh,
of the fact that I I wish someone was recording just me playing that,
yeah,
because the convulsions I made.
yeah,
For those who don't know what I'm talking about, you can also YouTube this. I advise you do watch streamers react to this scene because it's really funny.
yeah.
Um, Basically, Yara has a compartment syndrome, and they need to remove her arm or a part of her arm, and they need to go to the hospital to get supplies to do so. And after this whole big harrowing expedition to get there, Abby goes to the hospital, and Nora is there before she runs into Ellie and says all of the stuff that we would have would be in the basement, but that's ground zero, and we don't go down there. And some stuff is about to go down.
When someone
Uh,
says we don't go down there, you're not supposed to either.
right. And so you go down there because, of course, um, and it's real creepy section. You actually get to kind of see a ground zero for the first time of the infection, And that is when we see what is called the Rat King, which is basically a whole bunch of infected tangled together and like morphed into one giant massive heap of infected.
And until then, we've only encountered infected that were like a quarter the size of it.
Right. I think the biggest we had seen was a bloater.
Right.
That's probably the biggest.
Or the what are they called? The scramblers.
Scrambler, right. And that was kind of like those like, oh well, those are big guys.
But to put it
This
in
one,
context, the Rat King is like quadruple the size of that.
yes, and just something's happening. Like it's you walk into a flooded parking garage and there is an ambulance with one light
Yeah.
on the doorway, and you're like, video games have taught me that this is where I need to go, and so I will do it. And you go, and you're like, cool, I have the stuff. And then you turn, and there it is. And that is what I see in my Night Terrors.
Yeah.
And it is the most horrifying boss fight. Oh my god!
Yeah.
Just watch a YouTube video of it.
Yeah, please.
Or no, play it. Play it.
Oh yeah. No,
Play it.
play it. If you haven't
Go play
played
it.
yeah, with our closing thoughts, if you haven't played The Last of Us 2,
Play it. It's fun.
play it.
Do it.
Play it. It's fun, they said. No, but I this is outside of the Kingdom Hearts series, The Last of Us 2, I think by itself is my favorite game that I've ever played, and I can comfortably say that. Because I think it's a masterpiece combination of what gaming can do, and what I hope will continue to do, and I hope that Naughty Dog and other game developers don't get scared off by the controversy that it had, from making, games that cause discussions and that make us question ourselves, put us in uncomfortable situations that are groundbreaking and unique and original and riveting. And I think The Last of Us Part 2 has a lot to say about everything, about representation. I mean, the main character
Is a lesbian.
is a lesbian. The main character's girlfriend is bisexual.
A bisexual Jewish woman.
You have
A trans character.
a trans character in
Asian characters.
in a major title video game. Let me know what other video game has done that, because I don't know, because I don't think it has been done. But yeah, we are once again running out of time, but we got through it all. So thank you so much for listening. We are both very passionate about this game. And like I said, I really hope that this is a turning point in storytelling in gaming. I'm curious to hear what you think of that.
I think it is definitely a turning point. I think it's bringing these kind of antsy video game storylines and methods of storytelling to the forefront. Indie games and some other kind of art house, whatever that means, games have been doing kind of experimenting with story. I'm thinking about games like the Stanley Parable or the Beginner's Guide, have really played with just how we tell a story in this medium. And I think taking those ideas of what can we do here and putting it behind a AAA studio with a AAA title on a AAA platform,
Yeah.
it goes to show that this medium is just limitless and that you can achieve so much. Video games are not just, distractions, or they're not just, something to do. These are art.
I saw
These are
Joseph Gordon-Levitt did an episode of Hot Ones recently,
Did he?
Yeah, and he said, I forget what prompted him to say this, but he said, um, the future of storytelling is not in movies, it's in video games.
Uh, I love him.
And I think this game is exactly that. Um, so we're going to end this episode of the podcast with our recommendal section. So, whatever mood you are in, whatever situation or issue you have going on, and if you just want someone to tell you about some cool stuff to check out, we've got you. It's called recommendals. Basically, recommendations that would be insightful for your mental in one way or another. Listeners can write in about what's happening in their life to entermentaltainment@gmail.com. Let us know if you would like to be anonymous or not. And instead of giving advice, we give entertainment media recommendations that would be insightful for you to consume. You can also write in and tell us what you think works and what does not work for the show. We are open to suggestions on topics you'd like us to talk about or how we can make the podcast better. And if we can't think of any recommendals, maybe some brief, non-professional advice. So Matthew, do you have a recommendal?
Yeah. So I found a weird little podcast through another one I listened to. I listened to this this podcast on Wednesdays. I have my schedule called 99% Invisible. It's all about kind of the hidden parts of our world and design and architecture. It's about as nerdy as I get in terms of podcasts. But the host of that show, Roman Mars, recommended another one that is on his kind of podcast empire called Everything is Alive. And what this podcast is this gentleman interviewing inanimate objects. Now, it's not just silence. They have actors and they have people playing these objects.
Oh my God, I can't handle it. I love it.
And it's so surreal and weird, and yet, like, somehow really moving.
I'm already hooked.
Like, okay, so I'm going to recommend a couple episodes of this podcast. One of the more recent ones is an interview with Maria, who is a tissue box. I really like Alligator, who is a stuffed alligator.
Yes.
And I also like Lillian, who is a song.
Beautiful.
Yeah, just the strangest, weirdest little thing. And I'm like walking in the park listening to it and like trying not to cry. Like, it's so good.
You know what? This is me trying to do a segue. You know what else will make you cry tears of joy? It's a podcast.
Got it.
Which is my recommendal, called The Classic Gaming Brothers, and it is my dear friend Zach, and his brother Seth, and they do a podcast where they talk about classic games.
Yeah, I know him.
Yeah. You know, they talk about classic games and they talk about, you know, kind of all your favorite games, but they go really in depth and they're both super knowledgeable about it, which is part of the reason why I really like listening to it, is because I've learned so much just by listening to their podcast, because they're both just like, I mean, ever since I've known Zach, I've always told him he's just like an encyclopedia for really cool random knowledge.
Right?
And so I'm really happy that they've made a podcast out of that like quirk, because it's really entertaining to listen to. So yeah, I would highly recommend Classic Gaming Bros. I listen to them on Spotify. I know they're on a couple different platforms, but definitely check them out. Also, if you would like to support me in my business, this podcast, and anything I do creatively, you can subscribe to my KWEEN Patreon that will grant you perks, including early access to episodes of this podcast, shout-outs on the podcast, dance tutorial videos, specialized thank yous, and so much more. Matt, thank you so much for diving into The Last of Us Part 2 with me.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Make sure you are, you, the audience, are following us on here on Spotify so you never miss an episode. Again, thank you, Matt. I'm sure we'll see you in future episodes. And remember, stay geeky, stay freaky, and stay you. And remember to please consume kindly. Leave Neil Druckmann alone.
Leave him alone.
Let Naughty Dog live their best life. I'm keeping that in.
I was say, please do.